Between the years of 2006 and 2017, African American men and women were found 3 times more likely to be convicted of a crime than a Caucasian person. There were 38 arrests for every 1,000 African American people, while there were only 12 for every 1,000 Caucasian people. African Americans are convicted at a higher rate than Caucasians. But even more worrisome, Lopez reports that African Americans receive harsher sentences than someone who is Caucasian for the same crime, on average by 19.1%. Compounding this information further is the failure of U.S. prisons to re-incarcerate rather than to rehabilitate, making prison sentences clinical.
The 13th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States reads, "Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction." What is often forgotten is that felons or criminals are legally allowed to be held as servants because of disproportionate policing, sentencing, and arrest rates. African Americans are placed once again as slaves, being that they are unfairly at a higher rate to be imprisoned. We are allowing slavery to still prevail in the 21st century. There are still laws that are set up by an inequitable system.
The Felony Disenfranchisement Act is the practice of barring individuals who have been convicted of or felons of crime from voting in political elections. In the 21st century, there are states in the United States that take away an individual's First Amendment right, which is the freedom of speech or press. This freedom is being revoked. This act simply tells someone who was incarcerated that their voice does not matter. But historically, to African Americans have been deprived of this act before. States of Alabama, all types of conniving methods are used to prevent Negroes from becoming registered voters, and there are some countries without a single Negro registered to vote, despite the fact that the Negro constitutes a majority of the population. This letter was dated April 16, 1963. Nearly 6 decades later, the same demeanor still exists. Felons, Negroes, are treated as if they do not exist or they are not equal to someone else simply because something they cannot change.
On October 27, 1986, the 40th U.S. President Ronald Reagan signed into law the Anti-Drug Abuse Act. John writes that the law allocated funds to new prisons, drug education, and treatment. But its main result was to create mandatory minimum sentences. The mandatory minimum sentencing was created during the War on Drugs era, when crack and cocaine were very marketable in all areas. The mandatory minimum sentencing was a tactic to incarcerate people of color to continue to put them behind bars. Crack was considered to be the black man's drug because crack was cheaper version of cocaine. Powder cocaine is made from coca paste, which is derived from the leaves of the coca plant. Crack cocaine is simply made by taking powder cocaine and cooking it with baking soda and water until it forms a hard, rocky substance. These rocks are then broken into pieces and sold in small quantities. Cocaine was the white man's drug because of how much more cocaine costs compared to crack. It was more affordable for someone who was not black, which made this tactic inequitable. A man with 500 grams of powder or 5 grams of coke would be arrested in a 5-year mandatory minimum. Research also has shown that prosecutors are twice as likely to pursue a mandatory minimum sentence for black people compared with white people charged with the same offense. Among people who received a mandatory minimum sentence in 2011, 38% were Latino and 31% were black. Slavery is still prevalent in the 21st century.
An additional element of modernized slavery is police brutality, which in 2013, police brutality became more prevalent. Police brutality is defined as the use of excessive and or unnecessary force by police when dealing with civilians. The controversy surrounding police brutality is not a new idea, dating back to the 1800s. However, it has been a topic of conversation in recent years, with related cases popping up in the news regularly. Statistics from the FBI's account of justifiable homicides by police officers range from 397 to 426 deaths annually before jumping to 461 in 2013, the latest reporting year. Police brutality is another act of modern-day slavery by the justice system, but they're now acting of their actions rather than continuously putting inequitable laws in place. Black people are much more likely to be shot by the police than their white peers. A FBI data analysis found that police in the United States kill black people at a disproportionate rate. Black people accounted for 31% of the police killings victims in 2012. Yet they make up 13% of the United States population. According to analysts of 2015 police killings by the Guardians, racial minorities made up about 37.4% of the general population in the U.S., and they make up 46.6% of armed and unarmed victims. But they made up 62.7% of unarmed people killed by police. Black people are much more likely to be arrested for drugs, even though they are not more likely to use or sell them. And black inmates make up a disproportionate amount of the prison population.
Slavery is still prevalent in the 21st century.
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 Slavery is still prevalent in the 21st century.